My name is Ben Campbell. I am an assistant professor at the University of Georgia. I am an agricultural economist. So that's what we're going to be talking about today is economics. All right. I feel pleased to be here. This is my 5th year being here presenting, so it's weird how time sort of flies, or 5th time. So today we're going to talk about local GMOs and organic. So what people know, what they don't know, and can we get people to switch if we do things with price. All right. So the study is, of course, myself and then Dr. Josh Burning, another professor at the University of Georgia. So, plan for the day. I want to tell a story about local, organic, and GMO, and why these concepts matter for the produce industry. All right? We're going to start off with sort of perceptions and reality of what these terms mean and what people think they mean. Then we're going to move into sort of what would happen if we let people evaluate products, and then we started changing things around. So if we show someone local and something non-local, and see how would they react. So we want to see, could we adjust price to get people to switch away from these products? We would think people would prefer local. Well, if we started raising the price, could we get people to move to something else? People might prefer organic. Could we get them to switch if we raise price? So that's what we're going to do. And then what would the retail impact on retail environment? And then could we keep customers at a farmer's market if we started playing with, if we introduce a grocery store that sold local product? Then we're going to put it all together. So let me ask the question, what is local? Any ideas? What's local? Okay, so local in general concept is some kind of decreased miles to transport, right? That's what we agree on. But if we look at the USDA guidelines, it's 400 miles. The USDA set guidelines. But they also say that local can be defined by your state. So every state has the opportunity to set their own local standards. For instance, the state of Connecticut says that local has to be produced in Connecticut or 10 miles from point of purchase. Right? Other states say within the state. Some states really have no local geographic boundary they define. So thereby the USDA definition picks up. So there is a definition out there of what local is. There's also retailer definitions. There's a lot of retailers out there that set their own sort of designated, here's what it is. I think there's one retailer that says 8 hours from where it's grown to a store is the definition. So there's a lot of definitions out there. But what about producers and consumers? You know, consumer perception is reality. So what consumers think, it really is what drives what retailers ought to be thinking about. So this was a study we did several years ago in Connecticut, and what we found was roughly 73% had that Connecticut or within mentality. Well, so the positive is a majority of consumers knew what local was in the state. Flip side, 27% did not know. They put a wider boundary. Is it right or wrong? Well, it doesn't really matter. It's the state says it's within the state. Within the state, 27% had a longer distance, with roughly 6% saying it could be anywhere in the U.S. There's other studies out there that show that consumers, 1 to 2%, actually believe anywhere in the world is local. Right? So as a business, how do you react to that? Right? So why do people buy local? Right? Generally, the most cited things when you ask is, I buy local because it's fresher and it supports my local community. That's what we get over and over again, why people buy. So if we look at sort of on a scale and sort of rate it, freshness had an 88 out of 100 on why their beliefs about local, and the local economy did just as well, almost as well. Flip side, if we look at plants, which I know is produce here, but roughly plants have the same sort of meaning of local. So generally, my theory is that produce, where local generally sort of originated, has now sort of drives what other products, how people believe and view local when you're looking at a product such as plants. Right? Hard to read, but to me this is fascinating, and I've done this several times. I think I've done this once before when I was here. This is what do consumers believe or perceive local to be. All right, so we established that decreased miles of transport is what local is. So in the study we did a couple years ago, we found that roughly 2/3 to 3/4, thereabouts, believe that local is decreased miles of transport. So real good. People are, by and large, on the right path. Only 20% believe that local implied higher prices. Well, that's good news. Maybe there's an opportunity to increase prices if you're a retailer. We always talk about we can charge more for local. Well, if consumers are believing that their local is not higher priced, maybe there's an opportunity there to actually increase prices. Roughly 50%, if when you average these out, say that local implies something about being better for the environment, whether it be lower carbon footprint, greenhouse emissions, or just plain out better for the environment, okay? But what's interesting now is when we start looking at other things. Local implies it's non-GMO. Local doesn't imply that, doesn't say that at all, right? Years ago, the state of Connecticut was on trying to pass a GMO labeling law, which they eventually did pass. And once they passed it, a lot of people supporting local were excited because now their argument was now that we know what we can tell what is local. If it's labeled GMO, we know that it is not local, which is not the case, right? But so we do see people have misperceptions. So 20% believe that local is non-GMO. If we look up at, there's roughly, where did it go? 25% that local is organic. So look to your neighbors. 1 out of 4 of you believes local and organic are the same thing, right? So there is this misperception out there about what local is. With respect to organic. What's organic? Not what is it with respect to why do you buy it, but what is organic? Sorry? Yeah, it's there's a stat book this big that tells you what you can and can't do to be organic. Why do people buy organic? Well, generally we buy it because environmental or safety concerns, right? It's better for the environment, or you're safer because maybe less pesticides or synthetic pesticides. When you look at the literature, generally there's contradictory information out there with respect to whether organic is better or not for the environment or for people, right? And there are people on both sides of the fence. But, you know, that's what people are buying for, environmental reasons or safety concerns. But, so if we look at the same sort of thing with respect to why people are buying this no synthetic pesticide, which we generally consider to be true, or non-GMO, people are on the right track believing, perceiving, and actually what it is. 53% or so believe this higher priced. So organic is higher priced. When you look at things out there that sort of estimate how much more is the premium for organic, I think 47% is the average premium for organic. Large number of people believe that there is an environmental aspect, right? So you're buying it because it's environmentally friendly. And so we see that translated that a lot of people believe that there is some kind of environmental benefit for buying organic. But we see another quarter for no natural pesticides, right? That's not right, right? Synthetic pesticides are generally what are considered to be not be able to use for organic. There are some that can be, but by and large, no synthetic pesticides. But natural pesticides are used all the time. So 1 in 4 of you believes that no natural pesticides. So basically, nothing is being put on organic crops for any reason. And then 10 to 15% decreased miles of transport. So we get back to that. Local and organic are the same thing, right? So there is misperceptions out there of why things are, what is local and what is organic. What about GMO? What is a GMO? What's a GMO? Okay, so what is it? What does that mean? So it's basically the definition put DNA of one species into another to get some kind of benefit, right? So you're trying to get either resistance or yield. You're trying to do something to get some kind of benefit, right? It's still relatively new. Most people have no idea what it is. But there's a lot of things going on now with respect to the federal government and states trying to regulate until this is GMO free or either GMO free or non-GMO, right? So states started passing regulations. Connecticut was the first state to pass a regulation. What was interesting about their sort of the regulation they passed was that it would not take effect until 4 other states of similar size passed their own regulations. Well, then other states started passing. And it's tipped over when Vermont actually passed their GMO labeling regulations. The USDA, the Congress shot through a bill that now requires labeling on GMO products. It's going into effect, but what it is, they don't have to say GMO free or contains GMO on the package. What they have to do, you can just put a QR code. So a QR code suffices. So we get that sort of information thing. But there are laws, but people really don't understand it. If you see someone says non-GMO on a package container, what does that mean? Most people have no idea. But 80% of people want it labeled. So I want it labeled, but I don't really know what it means. Probably one of the best questions I've seen was Jason Lusk out of Oklahoma State did a survey. He does one monthly, and he asked the question, do you want GMO products labeled? 80% of the people said, I want it labeled. The next question, do you want products that contain DNA labeled? 80% of people wanted that labeled too. Well, what do we know about most products? If not all products? There's DNA in it, right? So we see that there's this, people have this perception and they really don't know, as far as with respect to GMOs, what it is. And so that sort of guides our sort of understanding of, is it bad or is it good? Right? So we had a study last year, or earlier this year, we asked consumers in Connecticut, what do you think, do you disagree or agree with these statements, right? So what we found was generally 60 on the scale, agreement scale, 0 being I disagree, 100 I agree. Roughly the mean score was 65 for those saying contains DNA from another organism, right? So we're on that side of agreement, but we're not really agreeing with it. We also see a lot of people, it's bad for the environment. It contains toxic substances, and it's increased chance of long-term health issues. So there are negatives that go along with it. We have others that have lower quality and increased pesticide use, right? So people have these feelings about what it is, but they really have no idea what it is. Right? Why should we care in produce about GMOs? Right? There are no produce that there are or will be GMO, right? According to USDA, that's not exactly true, right? There are 10 not currently in production, but approved GMO tomato varieties. We've got potato, papaya, squash, beet, apples, plums. So all these things have or will have GMOs in production in some point in the future. Right? So in the past, we haven't worried about GMOs. We haven't worried about how will that affect produce, because we haven't had those out there. But as we move to these commodities, these products being available, now it's a concern. How do we deal with those people who do not have an understanding of what it is or what GMO means? Right? So papaya, there are 2 GMO varieties. So when you look at the USDA, it tells squash, apples. Right? Apples are actually in production, and they've been approved for appearance in supermarkets because they've been deemed fresh. Right? Not fresh, but safe. Right? Sugar beets, potatoes, all these things now will need to be labeled. So what does that label mean, and how will people respond to it, and how much of the buying decision will being labeled as local, organic, or GMO, how much does that contribute to a buying decision? Right? So when we look at and ask people, how does this apply, and how would you take these different labels and apply it to your buying decision? Locally, generally scores the highest. People say, that is the thing that will drive my decision the most. What we see is that organic, generally, not by much, but it falls towards the bottom. So we have, on that scale of how much do you value each of the following on the 0 to 100 scale, 72 was the score on locally grown, organic scored a 60, where non-GMO was in the middle. But what you see is interesting here, we had people that had 0s and 100s. So some people said, these things will make no impact on what I buy. Yet others say, this will be critical in my decision making. Right? So what do we know? Before we get into sort of what we did in the study, the results we came up with, what do we know? Well, we know that there are segments out there in the market. Some people are price sensitive. I'm price sensitive. When I go to the market or go to the store, I buy the cheapest thing out there. That's why I'm not allowed to shop now, because I buy what's cheap. You have other consumers that care about, they're environmentally concerned, right? What kind of production practice, right? Was it sustainably grown? Was it environmentally grown? Environmentally friendly? Right? You have those people that care about that. You have people who care about product quality or product origin. Right? Some people care about where's it grown. So, as people, we know that there are segments out there that believe these things, right? And we can put, generally, if we start looking at literature out there, roughly we can say 20% are price sensitive, maybe 10% environmentally concerned. Product quality falls in there somewhere in the middle, and then product origin is roughly 10 to 20%. So we can have an idea. But we know a large part of the market is in an indescribable segment that has a mix of all these things going on, right? Some of you are local, diehard, will buy local no matter what. Some of you are price sensitive no matter what. A large number of you are in this category of, price and local and all these things go into this little basket, and it's sort of what you buy comes out based on all the attributes of the product, right? But we do know all consumers will not buy local, organic, or non-GMO, right? A lot of times we hear studies that people will pay this much for whatever. The average consumer will, but everyone will not. I'm the prime example. I'm not paying more for organic. I'm not paying more for local. I'm not paying more for non-GMO. Right? So, but that being said, I'm probably not the person that a retailer would be targeting because I don't do the shopping. Right? So, who are your consumers? And realizing that there's segments out there and everyone's not going to pay more. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to know what would happen if local, organic, or GMO produce was introduced to the market. So if we had a market set up and we put product out there, could we adjust price to get people to switch? So could I get you, if you're a local consumer and you say all else equal, you're going to buy local, how much do you have to raise the price for you'll switch for the local product? What would the impact of the retail environment be? Right? If we had a farmer's market and we introduced a grocery store that sold the same thing, what would happen? So we're looking at these sort of what would happen, what if scenarios. So our hypotheses were that we believe a majority of consumers will choose local and organic, all else equal. So if I put a local product and a non-local product in front of you, price, everything else equal, you would pick the local product. Same thing organic. If I put an organic product and a non-organic and everything's equal, you would pick organic. So that's sort of our hypothesis. But we believe we can get people to switch away from these. Right? By raising price, I can get you to switch. And with respect to the farmer's market, grocery store, we believe that most people will stay with the farmer's market because it has some kind of a sense of local there, that community thing. So we believe people will stay if we introduce a grocery store that's sold local. As far as GMOs, we believe the majority of consumers, all else being equal, will pick non-GMO over GMO. But I don't think we can get you to switch. The one thing about GMOs is there's this fundamental sort of philosophy difference going on. Some people believe GMOs are the worst thing ever. No matter what, they will not switch and change their mind. Other people believe GMOs are the solution to the world's food problems. They're not going to change their mind. So I think we're going to have a lot harder time getting people to switch with GMOs than we would with local and organic. Right? So what do? Summer and fall of this year, we did a study of around 1,300 consumers in Connecticut. Some of you may be wondering, well, I'm at the University of Georgia, why am I doing study in Connecticut? Well, I moved from Connecticut to Georgia within the last year. So that's sort of why this study is focusing on Connecticut. All right? So with respect to the sample, we had higher incomes, than the median income in Connecticut for our sample. We oversampled women, generally because they do the majority of shopping. And when we adjust the median age, our sample and the sample Connecticut population is roughly the same. So one thing I say adjusted because if we just look at the census population, that includes everyone. The sample we had was 18 or above, so those aren't directly comparable. So what we do is we adjust up the census population, thereby getting sort of, and they're roughly equivalent age-wise. So what people did was they did an experiment. So we showed people around 300. So we had 1,300, roughly we had 4 products. And so we showed 300 got one product, 300 got the next, 300 on down the line, right? So after this experiment, we did purchasing behavior. So what do you buy, how much do you buy, why do you buy, those type of things. And then demographic and socioeconomic questions, right? So now economics 101. Let's talk about the experiment. The first thing to know is all products are made up of attributes and levels. When you go into a store, you look at an apple, it is made up of different attributes and different levels. Okay? So an example, price is an attribute. 29, 39, 49 is a price, is a level. For apples, the color red. The color is an attribute. Red, green, yellow, all those are levels. So we know products are made up of attributes and levels. Your valuation of these different levels will give us the value for the product. So if you value red, it'll have a higher value than yellow, right? So once you evaluate all these products and these attributes and levels, that gives you your overall value. Or as some of you have heard at some point in the past, utility. So you look at the attribute, look at the product, evaluate the attributes and levels, come up with your valuation. You look at the product number 2, attributes and levels, your value. You choose the product that has the highest value to you, right? If the price, size, and everything's the same, but you like red apples more than green apples, your value for the red apple is higher, thereby you pick the red apple. So we're relying on that sort of concept to understand how people do an experiment to get people to make decisions, right? So if we get people to look at enough combinations of products, then we can determine how valuable certain things are to you, right? So that's what we did. So we had 4 products we talked about a minute ago. Fresh tomatoes, which we'll talk about today. We had planting tomatoes, geraniums, and turf, right? A larger product on specialty crops. We're going to talk about fresh tomatoes today, right? So we got people to look at 25 different products. So you may see a product of tomatoes. You may see a cherry tomato at a certain price with certain other characteristics. Then we'll show you a Brandywine tomato. Same price as cherry. All other characteristics the same. The difference in how likely you are to buy that product will tell us how valuable the variety is. So here are the attributes we had. So we had different prices, roughly we could find on the market, from $79 to $4.69 per pound. Different retailers, mass merchandiser, farmers market, grocery store, different origins. So we wanted to capture that origin. How valuable would a state of Connecticut grown tomato be for a consumer? But also, we want to look at New England, California, Canada, and no label. Why Canada? Canada is one of the largest horticultural production regions in North America. I think it ranks 3rd behind California and Florida. So it's a really big production region with respect to production, especially for the East Coast, exporting to the East Coast. Production label, we were looking at organic but not certified. You hear a lot of talk that maybe organic certification is very expensive, but if I do all the practices, just don't get certified, would that be a value? Certified organic, but now we're seeing terms come on the market that we're interested in, environmentally friendly or sustainable, right? What do those terms mean? I have no idea because there's nothing regulating what it is. But you're seeing them on the store, so we're interested in what was the value. And then GMO, GMO-free, and then certified GMO-free versus no label at all. So we're going to show people different combinations of these, have the same attributes but different levels, and see how they value them. All right. So I'm an economist, so I feel it's my duty to show you an equation. Here it is. What does it mean? Well, from this equation, it gives us several things. We can look at price sensitivity. right? So how people are sensitive people are to price. We can also calculate market shares and create different scenarios and see if we change something, what will the impact be, right? If we remember that you choose the product that has the highest value for you, well, if I show you another product and it has a higher value, you should switch. So then we can calculate market shares. We can look at frequencies. You look at product 1, and then I put product 2. Did you switch? Now we can start seeing, look at percentages. Those are market shares. Right? So, first thing we want to know of general interest. Out of all these things we've shown you, what drives your decision to buy? Well, the first thing is price. Price is really high. Roughly 27% of your buying decision. If you have a pie, 27% of that pie is price. 21% is variety. But what you see is on down the line is when you get to origin, so where it was produced, and production practice. They roughly fall third and fourth. GMO near the bottom. Right? So when we look at the valuation, how you value these things, GMO doesn't influence your decision as much as other attributes we have in the model. So when we look at just to see, do we think we conform to any kind of economic theory? Well, higher numbers are better. So we see that roughly people prefer lower prices to higher prices. That's good, right? Generally, we think of that people like low prices. If we found that people liked high prices, I would worry. But we see that people like low prices. We see with respect to variety, right? The brandy wine and cherry are the beefsteaks, the top. Brandywine cherry, the next two, and Sarah Black. Anybody know what Sarah Black is? Tomato? It's red with black. It's red and black. So a new product, generally people less preferred than something that's more of beefsteak or the cherry tomatoes. Retailer-wise, people prefer farmers markets, all else held equal. Then grocery stores. Mass merchandisers such as Walmart and Target are not as preferred as farmers markets and grocery stores. But now the things that we're really sort of interested in. Where's it from? Well, as we said, high numbers are better than low numbers. So, Connecticut was most preferred, all else being held constant. Then New England. But what we see is that actually no label does better than Canada and California. Right? So people prefer, all else equal, what we thought, that local would be preferred. For GMO, either certified GMO-free or GMO-free was preferred to no label at all, on average. Right? With respect to production practice, certified organic was preferred. Organic not certified, not so much. It's probably it's a trust issue that yes, you did what you said you were going to do. But we also see environmentally friendly did very well as well. Sustainable, not so much. So environmentally friendly, whatever that means, did well on people actually influencing their preference to buy. But, so if we look at market shares, if we said everything held constant, the only difference in the two products we show you is that wasn't good. That's what happens when you bump a button. So, when you hold two products constant for local, what you see is not all consumers will pick it. Everything equal. Only 38% of consumers in the study chose locally grown. You had 10% choosing California, 10% New England, 27% New England, 10% Canada, and 16% no label. Why did they pick these? I don't know. I have no idea. But I think it reinforces that fact that everyone's not on board and will buy local, even when everything's the same. So what happens if we change price? So we said, okay, we have an idea of how responsive people are to price. What if we start ticking up price? So in this case, we have no price change. So this is our base scenario here. We started going up 10 cents, 20 cents, all the way to $1.50. So we basically said 100% price change. That 38% of people did not switch. Do I believe that people will not respond to 100% price change. No. But what it says is that people are generally not as responsive to a price change. They're not that responsive, right? So we see there's no price change. They're going to be price sensitive. They're going to start changing. But by and large, local, they did not change. Those 38% of people said, you know what, I'm just not going to switch. What about organic? Well, all else being equal, 61% of consumers said, I'll choose organic, and 39% said non-organic. That's more along what we thought. We thought people, everything's same, you would pick organic. Could we get you to change? Yeah, we can get you to switch. As we start running up the price, so here's a 3% change in price, 5 cents, then 6%, which is equal to 10%, we start getting people switching over. So local, I couldn't get you to switch. But for organic, we see people starting to switch from organic to non-organic. By the time we get up here to that average 47% change we talked about earlier, we've switched, and now 64% say I'm going to buy non-organic, 36% buy organic. So to me, what it looks like is organic consumers are a little bit more price sensitive, and they are willing to switch compared to local consumers. For GMO, all else the same, roughly 50-50. Right? So the question would be, why would anyone pick a GMO labeled product? Why would you do that? My guess is this. My hypothesis is this. 50% of consumers are worried about GMOs. The other 50% do not worry and sort of get this sort of irritated when someone puts non-GMO on it. So that's my sort of hypothesis of why 50% of people would say it's GMO, but I'll take it. Is it sort of that, you're labeling it, you're trying to trick me. There's nothing wrong with GMO, right? To me, it goes back to, if you've seen the commercial about chicken. The one commercial comes out and they say, oh, our chickens are hormone free. The next commercial, I think it's Purdue or one of the other companies, comes out and said, all chickens are hormone free, right? So I think it's sort of that thing happening here, is that people see the GMO label and they're like, it doesn't matter, so I'll choose it over the non. But we can't get people to choose. We can't switch, right? So in this case, we start raising the price. Those 47% of people did not switch. We could not get them to switch to a non-organic or to a GMO. We couldn't get them to switch from a non-GMO to a GMO, right? So what does it mean? Maybe these people, maybe you could price higher for labeling, right? If those people really aren't going to switch, that they are GMO, non-GMO is what they desire, maybe a higher price on the non-GMO product would work. And what are the impacts of not labeling? If you don't label, now you've got 47% of people asking you questions. Is this non-GMO? Right? So, with respect to how this is going to shape out, I don't know. But I think that there is this group here that is not very price sensitive. They prefer a non-GMO product, and that's what they're really desiring. Compared to organic, where we can actually get people to switch to something else. We talked a little bit about the power of local, power of labeling, the power of that local feel, right? So if we have a farmer's market, no competition, you have 100% market share. A grocery store opens up and starts selling the exact same product that's local. For tomatoes at least, the grocery store would take 46% market share right off the bat, right? So the farmers, sort of the bastion of local produce, is the farmer's market. You think farmer's market, you think of local produce. A grocery store comes in with the same price, same everything, 46% of consumers will leave and go to the grocery store, right? So how local fits into how people start strategizing to increase sales, I think, for a farmer's market or a grocery store, having local on your shelves and labeling it, one of the biggest barriers that we see for consumers to say why they don't buy more local product is they don't see it labeled, right? So if you're not labeling it, I'm pretty sure a farmer's market is local, if labeled or not. If you're a grocery store, you're not labeling it. Maybe you're leaving some of these people on the table and you're not actually capturing those people that would buy. So that's sort of the study we did with respect to the GMOs, local and organic. But several years ago, I had another study where we looked at peaches. I thought it would be interesting to sort of talk about a real life example. So years ago, the peach industry in Ontario were forced to accept, they sold in the cardboard containers. Well, the peach industry said, the retailer said, we want you to put them in clamshells. So we did a study to look at what would the impact be of those clamshells. But we did some stuff with organic and local in there as well that I think is interesting. So they said, okay, here's what you have to, here's where you're doing it, here's what you have to do it, right? So we want to decrease shrinkage, so switch to the clamshell. So we went through, did the same kind of experiment we talked about a minute ago, showed people products, had them evaluate them, and then from that, we created market shares. So, all else equal, an Ontario peach versus a United States, a U.S. peach, generally coming from California, 64% would choose the Ontario peach. So we go back to that power of local. 2 out of 3 people would choose the local product over the United States product, or the import. If we raise the price, so of local, so in this case it's roughly 100%, we saw that people would start switching, right? Which is a little bit different from our product we saw a minute ago that we couldn't get people to switch off tomatoes. But we see people are starting to switch when we do price. We introduce organic. So as a firm, organic enters the market. So an Ontario organic product would actually cannibalize organic market share of the conventional. It wouldn't really do anything to U.S. market share. It would cannibalize the internal market share of those. So what would happen was those people that were local, non-organic, would now buy local, organic. So the United States market share was really not hurt. So we do see that things started to change. When you introduce organic, that people have evaluations of what they are, and that now will dictate what they choose. And how you go about pricing, how you go about introducing, will impact who is buying at your store and how much they're buying and what they're buying. So if we have, now in this case, we said, okay, we want to do a introduction and put a United States organic on the market. Well, they started cannibalizing United States market share more than Ontario market share. So what we see is that organic will pull some people away, and generally it's not going to, what we find is not cannibalizing from, or it's not taking away from other countries, or it's taking away from the local product. So if you put a California peach on the market with California organic peaches, the California organic will take from California, it won't take from the local. If you put a local peach on the market with a local product, the local organic will take from the local market, the local non-organic. With respect to introduction of new, this is a new label coming in, British Columbia started taking market share from Ontario. So that goes back to regional. Some people prefer that regional label. Well, they're going to take market share from the Ontario group or that local group, generally not taking it from the other groups. So if we think about putting this all together, right? So a lot of varied ideas. What would happen if local organic or GMO produce was introduced to the market? Well, we think organic consumers seem to be a little bit more price sensitive. They're switching away. So I think that if you started raising price, you would drive people to move from organic to non-organic. If you are selling local and GMO products, they seem to be less price sensitive, especially those GMO consumers. GMO consumers tend to be on one or two camps. You're pro or you're anti-GMO, right? And so for local GMO consumers, demand seems to be a little bit more inelastic, right? People are less likely to switch given a price change, so you could raise the price and thereby capture a little bit more profit if you raise price. Compared to organic, where we seem to think it's a little bit more elastic, by raising the price, a lot of people are going to switch to something else. There seems to be that large divide between local and organic compared to GMO. You know, what are you doing to address GMO concerns? Right? GMO is coming. We see that there are produce out there that is now becoming labeled for GMO use and sale. So what are you doing out there to address those concerns? Realizing they may not be valid concerns with respect to have any semblance of reality, but it's a concern altogether. How are you addressing it? And what you do could have a positive or negative impact. If you say, I'm going to label everything GMO, what about those people, 47% of people that really don't like that label? If you say, I'm not going to label, what about the 53% that want the label? Right? So how do you go about sort of having these two different extremes? Right? It's a little bit different than organic and local. If you have local and you don't label it as local or you label it as local, people really don't get offended. So local product, great. It's not, okay. Organic, same way. But if you label organic and I don't want it, I buy something else. But GMO seems to be a special case where you have people that are really on both ends of the spectrum. So how are you going about tackling this issue of addressing the concerns of each of these groups? And then we know that labeling can have significant impact on market shares for products. You know, we find that lack of labeling is a common barrier for consumers. Things aren't labeled, they're looking for it. We know that part of the buying decision is based on local, organic, and non-GMO or GMO, right? We know that. So why would this matter about labeling local products or labeling products? Well, at some point, if all else is equal, local may become the deciding factor of buying or not, right? So understanding that labeling is a barrier, you know, you need to be labeling, especially local and organic. If you're selling it, it needs to be labeled. GMO, I think, is a whole other ballgame with respect to how you go about trying to sort of balance this line of people, these anti and the pro people for GMOs. So that's a long-winded sort of story of local, organic, and GMOs. Right? We have different perceptions. People are generally wrong about what they believe these things are. We know that price will impact organic, since it seems to impact organic more than local or organic. Right? And how you go about labeling these things will have a direct impact on how consumers see your products and your business, especially when it comes to GMOs. Questions? Is everybody ready to leave?
Very interesting presentation, Dr. Campbell. Thank you. So, questions?
Hi, are you able to forecast the growth of organics? Do you think it's just a trend, or is it something that's going to last a while?
I think so the question is, can you forecast or get an idea, is organic a trend, right? I think for a certain group subset, it's a way of life. Same thing with local. So all these products have this core group that's generally a small part of the population that are on board, right? And so that group I don't see going away. The question is that larger group. And I think for me, what I see is that you see that group changing of who's in it, right? So will it disappear? Probably not. But who makes up that group will change, right? Because the things I've heard and read is that, you know, we move it for organic, we're moving away a little bit from more the higher end of consumers, so you're moving more of the lower income are trying to buy organic a little bit more because it's catching up with the Joneses, right? So you see some of that. So, you know, who's in these groups? I think it's what's going to change. Are these sort of segments, are these labels or production practices there? They're going to be there. It's who's in the groups.
I'm just wondering if you have any input on how different governments have been dealing with labeling or not labeling. So it's interesting what you're saying about what the U.S. government recently decided. Canada recently looked at it and decided there's absolutely no reason to label, and yet there's a lot of consumer demand for it. So just wondering if you have any sort of ideas about all of that.
I think it's interesting. So I've lived in Canada for 4 years, right? So I lived in Ontario. So I've got an idea more on the local and organic realm than the GMO realm. But I mean, I think by and large for local, it's probably coalescing around some kind of provincial or some kind of a small provincial or state level. Right? So generally, I know that Canada went back and revised their local standards, and I think they did some kind of kilometer, but it's provincial. Guess like Ontario, I think within Ontario is. Yeah, but so it's Ontario now. I think within Ontario can be considered local. So I think those are coalescing. Organic is pretty much those are going to be government regulated. I think GMOs where the interesting thing is going to be, especially as more and more crops become and are GMO. I think that's where you're going to really have different governments taking a different tact. The U.S., the federal government acted because states were starting to act on their own. Right? And so Canada took a different path. I think Europe It's taking an even different path. So, I don't see a standard coming out of this being it. I think GMOs are going to be a special case where you have this sort of wide range of regulations, which is going to make it very interesting when you start talking about importing, exporting, like coming from Canada to U.S. or U.S. going U.S. to Canada, or actually Canada coming to the U.S. So we make it very interesting to companies have to really know what laws are in place, because I think those are going to be fluid and they're going to be sort of reactionary to not only what consumers think, but how states react. I think states in the U.S. are going to drive sort of the federal regulations on it.
We have kind of a real interesting real-life case study in the country of origin label, which in the mid-2000s, seafood, meat, and produce were all required to have country of origin labeling. On the meat, because of trade, that has gone away probably, I don't know, a year and a half ago. Are you aware, have you studied, or are you aware of any studies out there of the effect of that non-labeling now of meats versus where they were labeled before by country of origin?
I don't know anything about meats. So I don't know. So meats, I don't know. So.
It would be an interesting comparison.
Yeah.
Other questions? North side of the room. I knew I could count on you.
No pressure.
My question relates to the attribute of quality, because one thing we see often with local products is the willingness to pay more tends to be higher, but the actual purchase intent and the willingness to pay at the time of actual purchase tends to go down significantly when the quality doesn't match, and that's a very hard thing to control for. Was there any variable in the study that controlled for quality?
So no, we kept quality the same. Other studies that I've been a part of, we've looked at quality. We put like blemishes on oranges, and we see that we see there are segments. Some consumers, if there is a blemish, they're out. Other consumers, they're okay with it as long as they get that price reduction to go along with it, right? And so I think that's sort of that realm. There's some consumers that are going to be, if it's not perfect, doesn't matter what I'm not going to pay. I wouldn't pay a dime for it, right? But other consumers will be accepting of quality differences, given a price to sort of adjust appropriately. So I think that's sort of how it's going to do there.
Thank you.
How did you do the different price changes and ask the consumers what they would? Maybe I missed the beginning, so I apologize.
No, I didn't go into it because that gets back in that black box of, So,
What was the question?
so the question is, how did you get the price changes? So what we do is once we get the attributes, we can get the highest and lowest of those utilities, and so then we sort of construct a line, and we can say on that line, if we start moving on that line, here's what the change would be. So we could do.
And then this is a hypothetical question to consumers?
Yes, it's hypothetical. So we know that it's.
It was like on paper to somebody? Or?
Well, so it's online. So it's hypothetical with respect to. That's why I really don't like saying that the willingness to pay is this, right? So that's why sort of the generic thing is we think that it looks like that organic consumers are more price sensitive, because we know that people lie, or people don't know as far as until you have to actually put out money. You inflate, and I think roughly 1.5 times is how much people inflate their willingness to pay by 1.5 times on online studies compared to. But the overall theme though is that I can get people to start switching over. They prefer non-organic to organic when I start moving price. For local and organic, local and GMO, I couldn't get people to switch. So I think that's the takeaway message is when we start looking at these things, that you have organic seems to be this area that maybe is sort of trending, not out, but it's trending sort of that people are a little bit more fluid with respect to, how much they would pay for it compared to other things. Because there's 100 labels out there. There's environmentally friendly. There's sustainable. We've got local now competing, and most 20% of people think local and organic are the same thing, right? So once you start putting all these things together, so I think organic's really suffering with respect to on that end.
Dr. Campbell, oftentimes research studies such as this contain surprises for the researchers. I kind of get the impression from your presentation that you really won't be surprised by any of the results. Is that true?
I was surprised that GMOs, that as many people picked, they would do a GMO over a non-GMO. And I think that goes Whether that's a direct result of 50% of basically our sample sort of spiting non-GMO for whatever reason, I don't know. But I was surprised that 50% actually said they would pick a GMO product over a non-GMO. And I was surprised that we couldn't get people to switch off local. I assume, I guess you think that people are like you and that I'm price sensitive, thereby that people would go to, I could easily get someone, if I started up in the price, I could easily get somebody to switch. And we couldn't get them to do that. We couldn't get, especially for a local, which like GMO I sort of understand, right? People have this tendency to be scared of GMOs. Okay, fine. But for local, I assume that we could get people to move.
One last question. Anybody? Well, one more round of applause for Dr. Campbell. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
guys.